I think Rosie Duffield showing such courage to walk away. As Starmer has not only come across as a complete tyrant regarding authoritarian policies, expecting the people to obey while the cabinet's taking freebies and whatever else. But also the fact, I'm a little surprised it's taken this long after the constant bullying and intimidation she's had from other politicians within the party over agenda critical views, which Sam has basically buried his head in the sand and hid away from and done nothing about reprimanding any of them over.
I mean, I have seen the senior Labour politicians come forward in support of Rosie Duffield and say that bullying and hostility is absolutely unacceptable and kind of stand shoulder to shoulder with her publicly. We don't know precisely what has been said or done behind the scenes. But Darren, thank you so much for your call and for your thoughts on that.
I've been a Conservative voter for the last 24 years and I found it really difficult at the last election to decide who to vote for. I went down the list of who was available. Now I live in Canterbury, so Rosie Duffield is my Labour MP, and I'm not a huge fan of her.
Okay.
There was a few things that happened during her last period in power, and I feel like she has dirtied her book a bit. But then I looked down the list and I was like, well, I know the Conservatives are going to lose, so do I want to put a vote in for them? I didn't really know the candidate particularly well, but the other candidates that were available, none of them were actually based in the area. They were all people who'd been dropped in just to be someone on the ballot sheet. So I did end up voting Conservative at that time, but of course that MP hasn't made it in. I'm thinking now, well, there's maybe one of the potential candidates for the Conservative leadership that I think has credibility for what I believe in.
And who is that?
I think Tom Tugendhat is probably my prime candidate. And the others are mostly just pandering to the right wing and trying to get votes back from Reform, and I think that's probably a mistake.
But I feel that Labour is also, to an extent, showing a bit of leg to Reform voters. And there's no doubt that the Reform contingency is a huge threat to the two main political parties. And I heard Wes Streeting talking to the newsagents this week, and he said he wouldn't be at all surprised if Reform became the official right-wing party, the official party of opposition, were there to be a Labour government in this country. That's the extent to which they can see Reform coming up on the horizon. But it is disheartening then, if you are in the centre of politics, to see the Overton window lurching so far to the right, effectively all because of Farage, isn't it?
Yeah, I think Keir is actually doing a very good job, and I appreciate that he's probably disenfranchised some of the Labour vote, but I have been quite impressed that he's made decisions that I think the Conservatives haven't made because it would make them unpopular, and they were trying to avoid becoming even more unpopular. So I'm quite behind him at the moment. The only thing I'd like him to do a U-turn on is the fees for private schools, and that's just because of the kind of the national impact that could potentially have.
What you mean with previously privately educated students going into the state system?
And the closure of the private schools. We've seen almost one a week announcing they're closing, and it will have an impact on the money coming into the country as well, in a way. I did see a prediction from one of the government bodies that it was going to lose more money than it was going to gain, but ultimately that's the decision of the Treasury, how they want to approach it. So I'm behind them at the moment. I hope that they will stick to their guns on things, and I'm quite impressed that they are doing that at the moment.
I'm a 46-year-old male. I'm registered blind and disabled, and I am so disillusioned with our country and our governments and our politicians, and I think with all of the parties, really. You know, I find, I mean, I can't talk for other people, but I've certainly lost trust when they say one thing and then do another, especially when it comes to elections and voting, in the case of Labour as well. And then once they got in, the backtrack and the squalor and the scandal, and I just feel like I really want to vote. And the point that you made a couple of minutes ago about kind of not voting, letting the fascists and all that in, I am a gay male, by the way, as well, and you know, I find it really difficult. But I feel like every time I'm voting, I'm supporting the process of the squalor and the scandals and the lies and this and that, you know.
What would you specifically point to in terms of the current Labour Party, our current government, making a promise that they then backtracked on?
Well, it's so soon. There's been quite a lot, but to be honest, it's not giving, you know, taking the money away from pensioners for the heating, I think.
Right. But they never said that they weren't going to do that, but then I suppose they never said that they were either. So that's a legitimate point. Do you think there's anything in them saying that even the OBR weren't able to measure the extent of this black hole in the economy?
I take that on board. Definitely. I mean, the last decade or so has been quite horrendous. So I do take that on board. And for any party that was going to get in, it's a mammoth task. Of course it is, you know. But I just feel so disillusioned by it all, almost, you know, lost. And we say we live in, you know, a democracy and everything, but do we really? But I also think, I mean, is there a whiter than white politician? You know? Yeah,
it's if you're expecting perfection from anyone, I think that you're going to be disappointed. But that's not to say that we shouldn't have a basic minimum standard. And it's appropriate that we hold politicians, particularly senior politicians who have the balance of the power, to those standards. Monsoon, thank you so much for your call. I hope we speak again. The biggest thing that I see, and I'm talking as somebody who is working in schools during the week, so I encounter and talk to a lot of teenagers, is being so bombarded with information constantly and therefore not really believing anything or believing in anything. And it's an apathy of, that many of us share because there's a feeling that the system is broken. But it goes beyond that. I think it's an apathy that is brought about by being overwhelmed with so many contradictory narratives and agendas. Is that something that you recognise?
Yeah, because, again, I don't know what to believe in, because it was, especially TikTok, it definitely, I would say, influences my own political beliefs, because I see a lot about, is Labour good or is it bad? And I don't know what to support.
And you're obviously as well, you're building an algorithm. So the more that you watch with analysis about the Labour Party being either good or bad, the more of the same content that it's going to give you. And so we're ultimately all siloed, aren't we, into our own little echo chamber, which is one of the reasons why I love sitting behind this microphone so much once a week, because you don't know who's going to call in. I mean, what do you think the solution is to it, Riley? What would you like to see happen?
I don't know what there can be done about it, because, as you said, we're definitely overwhelmed with information nowadays, and also, but then again, we're siloed into that has put it.
I mean, I think particularly, I was quite heartened, and I'm going to talk more about David Lammy's speech at Labour conference in the next hour. I thought it was a barnstorming speech. I thought it was really great. And I was heartened to hear him mention Putin's interference in our democracy and the flooding of the online space with disinformation. And I think maybe that might be the way forward, that there's not much you can do about the algorithm, but you can clean the online space up a little bit and ensure that we are having access to trustworthy information.